Welcome to the PRAKSIS podcast. This episode is recorded during PRAKSIS' 26th residency, Bricking It. The residency is organised together with architects Don Lawrence and Anya Rahman, as well as with Centre for Culture and Learning Samong Haven, which is located in Bali where the residency is taking place. The residency explores the technology, history, aesthetics and potentials of brick as a sustainable medium. Today, as part of getting to know each other, 3 of the residents are being prompted with the simple but fun question: what comes to mind when you think of brick? These residents are Francisca Susmel, an architect working with community-oriented design who's originally from Argentina but currently living in Puerto Rico; Huzefah Haroon, who's an architect and educator from Pakistan; and Breanne Johnson, an artist and designer from the USA who's currently living in Mexico.
So I was raised in Argentina. I'm an architect. I think that maybe what comes to my mind when I think about bricks is my first house. So there's a lot, as you've seen in Europe, there's a lot of brick construction in Argentina too. So I'll always relate to it as a warm material, like that gives you like this coziness. So that maybe that's the way I see it, and I think that's maybe something that it's not lost, but maybe it used to be more common, or used to be a trend, and maybe changed. So I still think of it as something that maybe we can all relate, this coziness, and how that material makes us feel. So I think that's interesting because maybe the way that that we think sometimes about construction or efficiencies, how to make things cheaper or easier, and maybe at some point maybe bricks weren't that type of solution anymore, so that part is kind of lost, and maybe we should somehow bring that again to the table, to the discussion.
Okay. When you say that the house that you lived in was made by bricks, and you say that it was worn, would you like to tell us how do you think that the material played a role in creating that warmth?
I think it's a sense of warmth, right? Maybe because of the color or the texture, or maybe because you relate like brick to housing. Maybe for us in Argentina, like it's or probably in other countries, maybe other institutional buildings or public buildings won't have bricks, but in houses you will, and now you see sometimes contemporary architecture or contemporary houses which is like glass and concrete, and I feel like that's kind of a little bit cold, right? So maybe it's nice and interesting, but maybe you don't feel as cozy as you will feel in a brick house, right?
Yeah. And I mean, when I think of it, what you've just said, it kind of makes sense because, and maybe Breanne can kind of elaborate on it and let us know what you think about it. So when I think of brick, it does make us feel warmth, and perhaps it's also because it comes from earth, and it's something that is still very naturally made. So it feels like because it belongs to where we live, it makes us like the warmth gets extended into our shelters also. So it's kind of like we're still living within earth in a way. So maybe that plays a role in it, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe instead of something industrialized, right? Like something brought from a big factory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I also think of chimneys when I think of brick.
Yeah, exactly.
And that has this like resonance. But we should also introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
I am Breanne. I am an artist who is from the United States, from California originally, but I've been living in the Midwest for the past 10 years and recently moved to Mexico City, actually. So I'm still sort of adjusting to life in Mexico City. My practice has been primarily out of the Midwest for the past 10 years. And I also associate the bricks very much with the Midwest, which is like very cold winters, and so bricks have, again, like this cozy connotation. But actually the first thing that I think of when I think of bricks is this apartment that I lived in Chicago that was a brick building, and the backyard was like rubble. It was just like overgrown, bunch of junk back there, and I moved into this place with my two friends from college, and we were really like excited to have an apartment together, and so we decided we were going to fix up the backyard and make it into a nice space, but we didn't have any money. But there was this pile of bricks in the corner, like massive pile of bricks, and so we approached them like very much as building blocks to be everything that we wanted in the backyard. And so we built a fire pit out of the bricks, we built a patio out of the bricks, we built structure, like seats, everything was brick. And I still associate them with this sort of like unit building block that can kind of be anything, like a Lego. You know, they have this like capacity to transform into many kinds of structures because they're small.
Yeah, it does feel like something that's like a adult Lego that
Yeah.
gives us the opportunity to kind of build in real scale. So yeah, I am Huzefah, and I'm an architect based in Pakistan. I kind of currently I am questioning the role of us as designers in terms of the disconnectivity that's currently existing between us as makers also. So perhaps thinking of ways where we can become thinkers but also makers in terms of hand building, and that's something that I would like to explore from here onwards. And it's interesting that we're kind of taking this conversation towards like how the brick feels, because now that you say that you've kind of built with brick and you've talked about the warmth of the house, it kind of makes me think about how have I encountered brick. And this was in Lahore, which is kind of in the like we're in, like Karachi's in the south, so it's a lot more about concrete. And when I think about temperature, like concrete does feel a bit cold. Whereas when you move to Lahore and there's so much brick, you start feeling the warmth there. But at the same time, I think it also complements the greenery really well, because it's again like earthy colors and it's from the earth. But at the same time, then right now what's happening in Lahore as well is that because of the need for quicker construction, it's becoming similar where they're kind of making the structure out of concrete and they're actually cladding it with brick. And if I think about it and reflect on it, there is an institution which does like business programs. It's known as LUMS in Lahore. That's actually done with brick, and it's a huge campus. And you walk around it, there's a lot of greenery, and it kind of feels very, even at that huge scale, it kind of feels very cozy. But at the same time, this recently, I went to another institution, but that has done a mixture of concrete and brick. And that does not have the same warmth, because even if it's cladded and you don't see the concrete underneath it, it still doesn't feel the same for some reason, because I don't know, maybe the structure isn't fully integrated within itself.
So it's just like a finishing.
It's just the finishing,
Like
it's
details,
a skin over concrete structure, and it's so the skeleton, like the concrete and like the columns and the beams are done by concrete, and then the infills, like the walls, are maybe done with brick. But then again, sometimes the mortar is just concrete, so kind of defeats the purpose, I think.
And what about bricks? Because you were talking about this concept of what was the concept?
Jugar?
Jugar.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, probably bricks fit really well in that concept,
Yeah,
because you can reuse them. You can, I don't know, you can walk down the street and find like 50-year-old bricks and bring them back, and as you were saying, use them to build something new. And probably it's a material that will last, right? Or has singularity, and you can just take the mortar off and reshape it or use it again to, I don't know, for something else.
Right. So about this, I found something yesterday with when I was speaking to Yon, and he said that it's much easier to reuse bricks when they were previously bonded with limestone, but now when they're bonded with concrete. And this is something that Ellie also resonated, and she also emphasized on the same point, where it gets a lot difficult to disintegrate brick once it's been bounded like with concrete or cement. So there it kind of feels like it kind of stops that process of continuity there. So, but if I think about Jugar, I think Andy Rahman, who's going to be part of the residency later on, has done a lot of customized bricks, where he kind of also has introduced this locking block of brick, which kind of works like Lego.
Yeah.
And I think he's made facades and screens with it. So I think that rethinking of the brick as a module also creates that repurposing that can happen for later.
Yeah, we were
times
talking
also.
about this with Ellie, and it's like thinking about the brick as a sustainable material is kind of misleading because it's still extracting minerals, it's still extracting resources, and so it's not, in the way that it's produced right now, it's not like truly a sustainable material, but maybe a way to approach an idea of sustainability is in deconstruction. So if something is designed to be able to be taken apart and reformed later on into something else, maybe it becomes more of an indefinite material. And like the brick already has that innately because it's a unit, but because we use concrete as mortar, it takes away that. So like maybe there's a way to think of construction with brick as like, hey, this is a house now, maybe it's going to be something else later.
And even in the also the positive thing is if you don't reuse it, you can just put a brick on the river and it will just erode, right? And there's nothing there that will affect negatively the environment.
Yeah.
It will decompose and then earth will be back. But probably the negative thing will be all these areas where you just like took away all the earth, and now what happens with those areas? Because maybe you cannot do anything else there. You just have to move elsewhere, and that part would be abandoned.
Yeah.
But for the positive side, I see what you mean regarding using them back.
Yeah. Or maybe there's a way to integrate other materials, as we've sort of been talking about, to make them like, first of all, take less soil or ceramic material, and then also maybe to make them into something that is more interlocking and like has, you know, recycled plastic or whatever else in it as well, so that the thing can continue to exist and take less from the land. Like maybe it can do both, you know?
Yeah.
If we solve some design problems.
So I could think of, let's say, if we are to think of adding something to the materiality in terms of brick and the making of brick, and if we have to retain that, if it kind of weathers, it kind of gives back to the earth and it kind of becomes part of it. So in that manner, maybe, and I'm just thinking, and this is something that's become more of a conversation where we're adding plastic into like natural materials, and we're having this conversation of that, we're kind of recycling material that doesn't kind of disappear and erode. But now that we're talking about it, and I'm thinking that is that the best way to go, because then we're kind of like, Francisco, what you said about like giving back to the earth, right? And kind of with the river eroding, it kind of returns
Goes
to
back.
where it belongs. But then we're kind of adding microplastic back to the earth, and that's not very ideal.
But we'd have to deal with the microplastics anyway.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, maybe it's a separate problem for a separate conversation. But like maybe there is an approach to, because that is a material that's not going to biodegrade, and it's not going to erode. Like
Maybe it's a different conversation.
Maybe it's different.
Because maybe if I think about how to compose a brick with organic fabrics, maybe I'm still thinking about that. Like, what if I cannot use this anymore? What's going to happen? How this going to decompose? And if I think about mixing it with plastic, then I think we need to think about like some other issues and some other considerations that may be part of the discussion, or maybe you see how to make a plastic brick.
And that's happening, like
different thing, yeah.
Yeah, and that is happening. I just feel that if we are, like, the reason why I was mentioning that is perhaps then we integrate materials that are like from the earth or organic only, so like coconut husks or maybe wood waste, and the shavings that come out, maybe that could be converted and mixed with clay, and maybe something can come out of it. And Ellie also showed like certain composites with brick, which were mostly natural. So perhaps that's a lot more conscious way to go about it if we are thinking of reusing it and repurposing it.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Then it also kind of begs the question that what about the material that's not going anywhere, which is the plastic?
Yeah.
So have you?
And are you losing this warmth thing?
I was just thinking that as well.
If you lose the color, you lose the texture. Do you lose also how you relate to that brick, as we were talking at the beginning, or are you gonna? Because we have concrete blocks there, and I don't relate to those blocks as I relate to bricks, right?
it's almost like when you look at a brick, you want to touch it. But with concrete, it's almost like I know I'm going to feel the cold when I'm going to touch it. So
I actually
The
don't have
rough
that
and-
relationship to
Yeah?
concrete at all. No, I think living in Mexico, there's so much concrete for everything. I mean, brutalism is such a part of architecture there, and it's also very hot. And so the concrete, to me, also has a connotation of warmth, where it's like this bench is concrete bench. It's sitting in the sun all day. When I sit down, it like has. I mean, it's still like it has a different, I guess, effective thing going on, where brutalism is maybe not cozy, but but I think that material also has like a similar quality to it. Like I don't see concrete and brick as that similar. Maybe there's like an emotional register that brick has that concrete doesn't. But I think that concrete also has a lot of potential to like create a warm feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I like concrete as well. I don't have a problem. I like brutalism. I don't know. We studied architecture,
Yeah.
right? We studied
Yeah.
how the big masters like brought this thing, and they could like what's the name of it? The liquid stone, right?
The liquid stone?
La piedra líquida.
Is what they call concrete.
Yeah, because you can mold it.
Yeah.
Then it
Ah,
dries,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
it becomes stone. But it gives you so much possibility, so much plasticity that maybe you didn't have with other elements, with wood or with metal. So it's still really interesting what you can do. What happens with these concrete blocks is that, as we see them, they're at least like sometimes it's like cheap thing that you will finish with something else. You will plaster them. You don't want to expose them. Maybe like a fine concrete.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something you want to see, and that gives you also a lot of possibilities. And there's people mixing them with or coloring concrete, and maybe then you reach a point. I feel the same thing with rammed earth, right? Sometimes you don't feel the difference between concrete and rammed earth because you can also apply colors to concrete, and you will get something similar.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Talking about rammed earth and different kinds of concrete, I'm also thinking that perhaps the version of concrete which is terrazzo, which is mixed by like chips, glass chips, that could be a
Stones,
nice
little
way
stones.
of recycling brick that is bonded with concrete.
Yeah.
So maybe that kind of debris can be added to the floor in terms of like artifacts. So at least some aspect of that warmth of brick stays within that, and it keeps continuing. So even if it's kind of taken apart and we can't really save the brick as a whole, maybe it can be used in parts or like remnants of it. So the story kind of continues. I think the warmth also has a lot to do with the kind of story it comes up with.
Yeah.
Right? So kind of adds to the experience that, oh, we know the story of the brick, it has been made like this. But with concrete, it's mostly like maybe the process doesn't feel so innate with us.
Yeah. Also, I think maybe there's the human cost of concrete, which is that it's a very toxic material to work with. Like if you're grinding concrete, there's like a lot of toxins there. And so maybe also we attribute some of the like effective quality of the material to a kind of understanding of what it takes to achieve it. Or I mean, maybe we're divorced from that as well. I guess I'm not totally sure, but I think that for me, concrete is beautiful and interesting and has a lot of possibility, but also has this kind of like dark human cost to it
Right.
that maybe brick doesn't have quite as much.
I think the coldness with the concrete comes to me because it's mostly isolated in the manner that it's not being complemented with plants or greenery, and it's just, if it's concrete, it's just like Karachi is literally a concrete jungle. So if it's standing alone, there's nothing to complement or make us feel that warmth. Because now that I think about it, and you said like a concrete bench can still feel nice, and I'm like, hey, yeah, in a park, if I sit on a concrete bench, it feels nice, even if it's a terrazzo concrete or pigmented concrete, which is like white. I want to sit on it because it's kind of molded in a way which like supports my back, and it gives me a view of the park, and it's green and everything. But then there's this aspect which helps me realize that the concrete exists not in isolation, but it's there to experience a larger picture, which is still nature and what exists around us. But in isolation, if I look at concrete houses, which is like just like asphalt road, and rows of concrete houses, that is something that doesn't feel so right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
It needs to be concrete in moderation.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what I think.